Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily right here on Channels Television. I'm Kayla Megwa. What a day we're about to have.
What a day.
Well, good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde. I'm curious, what's this day about, Kayla?
Stay with us. Stay with us. It's coming. It's coming. But first of all, let's take you to Tumbengiwa this morning. Our skyline today from Kano. The stomach of the elephant, Tumbengiwa, one of my favorite places in Nigeria, very historic city. And of course, it's in the news these days. You know, everyone is talking about one thing or the other happening in the city of Kano. But we're giving you the skyline of the entire city, just so you can bask in the beauty of Kano State and what it stands for. Ayo, have you ever been to Kano?
Actually, yes. I have been, I think I was in Kano in 1980, 81, thereabouts. Yes, a very long time ago. It was my first train ride to Kano, and my dad lived well and worshipped somewhere around Sabongeri there. But in 1988, I made a repeat trip to Kano, 1988, and also by train. I had some memorable, very, very good memories of that trip. Unfortunately, I can't remember all the people that I was with on that trip, and it remains memorable for me. Have I been to Kano subsequently? Maybe 1 or 2 times, but believe me, Kano is a memorable city, a historic city, a monumental city, if you ask me. And the memories of Kano that people, of the north that people have, should change when you see images like this, don't you think?
Indeed, but let me find out from Nelta. Have you ever been to Kano?
I have, and one of the things that's remarkable about that city, with my first time there, is the heat.
Okay, so it's not a Kano thing.
No, hold on. No. I said
thing.
my first experience.
Okay.
So we arrived in the night from school. We arrived in the night, and then in the morning we were going somewhere. We had this cassette. The car had this cassette player that I moved the cassette and put it on top of the dashboard. We went into the building. We went for an event, and then came out of the event. The tape had melted. But one of the most remarkable things also about Kano is that, I'm telling you, is that, and that was around April, and Ayo is laughing right now. One of the most remarkable things about Kano from the 1950s, 59 thereabout. I mean, I watched that documentary recently. There was this shoe manufacturing factory industries. Kano was known for shoes. The leather, the rubber, and everything, all the raw materials for those shoes were coming from this country. I'm not talking about the granite pyramids. The granite pyramids were there. Yeah. And from Kano, we had pellets. After the granite oil had been pulled out, had been extracted, we had the remnants, or what do you call it? The byproducts. The chaff being shipped off to the United Kingdom for animal feed. Nigeria had what it takes to move, and Nigeria still has it. I mean, I was watching that documentary and I said, it's possible to get back here. But I asked the question, who will bail the cat? And someone replied, one man. So who's that one man? Is it you?
Like, I'm a woman.
Or maybe it's Ayo.
I identify as she.
Ayo, is it you that will bail the cat?
Well, first of all, I'm not a cat.
Just the way we hear.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm not a cat.
It's pretty much the same way we hear Nelta, I said Nelta, the same way we hear Laolu Akonde say, who will tell the president?
Yeah.
Who will tell the president? You know, he's done, I think last time I watched was part 4.
Who will tell the president?
Who will tell the president you know, that something is wrong, that these are the things that are the issues. How do we get them fixed, you know? But Kano, I want to be able to take a look at that skyline again so we can discuss a little bit about this ancient city and how wonderful this place is before we move on to other things. You know, second largest city in Nigeria. What you're looking at right now is actually a university. It's a university in Kano, right there. Massive place. You're just looking at one part of it, you know. And then, of course, in Kano, it's located in the Savannah south of the Sahel. major route of the trans-Saharan trade. So that actually brings up that business element, you know. It's been doing business for millennia. It's been doing business for millennia. It's a traditional state, the traditional state of the Dabo dynasty. They've ruled as emirs over the city since the 19th century, which is why that seat in Kano of the emir is a very important seat. The Emirate Council is a current traditional institution, inside the city boundaries of the state, and is under the authority of the government of Kano State. But a lovely city, very historic place. I wanted to get Ayo to talk to us a little bit about how historic this place is and some of your experiences in Kano, Ayo.
Well, I think that's a subject altogether for a symposium for some other time. But to quickly answer the question Neota put forward, I'm not a cat, so I don't need to wear a bell. And to answer Laulu's question, who will tell the president he has an emissary around him, a lot of people around him. But, you know, for me, Kayla, one of the things to celebrate about Kano, as with other cities like it in the country, historic and monumental cities in Nigeria like that, is that we have something to sell. Thankfully, as an organization, we are also part of the process of marketing Nigeria in terms of our tourist capacities. You talked, Neota, about the leather industry in Kano. And a good number of people will tell you, if I saw a video, I'm sure you must have seen the video as well, of a young man who was saying that someone, you know, would take leather from Nigeria, I'm not sure whether it's Kano or Kaduna, take them all the way to Italy, do whatever it is that they need to do with it, and ship it back to us and sell at exorbitant prices in shoes, in belts, in bags, and all those things. And what do we call them? Made in Italy. And because it is Italian shoe, Italian bag, Italian belt, we think it is premium. It came from here. So, dear Ministry of Trade and Industry, is there anything we can do about it? I understand that the leather value chain in Nigeria is worth tens of trillions of naira. Is there a market for us here? Absolutely. In the meantime, talking about business, today, Business Morning on Sunrise Daily, we'll be talking about this. Yes, optimizing $900 million bond proceeds. That's what the whole thing is going to be about this morning. Is there anything else happening today, guys?
Well, Ayo, I don't know if it's about what's happening or, a lot of things are happening today. But most importantly is that evacuation continues in places like Borno, where the flood waters, according to the governor in the statement, he was talking to our colleague yesterday, mentioned that at least 100,000 people were affected. And we saw the videos of the evacuation being done by the military and paramilitary agencies trying to get people who were affected by the floods away from the flood waters. In his words, from his first tenure as governor, he had gone along the floodplains talking to the people. That's the vice president when he went to visit. He had gone along the floodplains talking to the people, appealing to them to move. And those who were building on floodplains or water channels, begging them to take down their structures and all of that. But nobody, in his words, nobody was listening to them. And now this hit. That was in his first tenure. But we do know that at the beginning of the year, there were those predictions from the Hydrological Agency and from NIMET about the likelihood of floods, predicting floods and rains. And he talks about the amount of waters that came in from the rains and from the dam, taking too much. The dam was taking too much above its capacity. So they're going to reconstruct, expand, and all of that. All of these things point to the fact that nobody is listening because, in my personal opinion, no consequence management. So as a governor, you're given an instruction, move from that place, and nobody moves. And then now the flood hits, and you're coming to give them relief materials? Who's going to be punished?
I mean, the figures are out now, 49 people dead. And that figure is actually 1 million. It's not 100,000. It's 1 million.
No, I'm talking about his interview yesterday where he said 100,000 were affected, at least 100,000. Those were his
It's actually 1 million people that have been affected, at least from the figures that we're seeing, about 1 million people. Maybe he's talking about that particular camp where he was, because he was
I
distributing, yes, he was distributing
Bakassi
money
IDP camp.
at the Bakassi IDP camp. So 47 dead, 226 communities affected. And this one is in Kano, by the way. There's a flood in Kano. Okay. So 49 people dead, 226 communities affected, and SEMA, that's the emergency state in Kano, has confirmed these figures. And of course, you know, it's one of those situations, like we said yesterday, that you have to actually look for where the fault lines are. Who has dropped the ball? At least we're able to hear from the governor of of Borno State yesterday, able to say, this is what has been going on. And that's one of the things I like about Professor Zulum. Don't play with him. He'll talk. He'll tell you the truth. He'll tell you exactly what's been going on. You know, and watching him talk like that, watching him suffer, because I mean, it does feel sometimes that we have some kind of love for Professor Zulum, but it's because he's open and he's able to say, this is what has been going on. I have warned you about this. I said this was going to happen. None of you listened to me. Now look at where we are. Well,
again, before we go to the papers, and the papers are read, before we go to look at what some of the headlines are in the newspapers, you need to understand this. Someone in government is giving approvals for those structures that are being placed along the floodplains.
Yes.
Someone in government. And that someone needs to be identified, or some people identified, and that cuts across the country. It's not just Borno State. So please, let's go now and look at what some of the papers have as their headlines, and then we'll come back to this.
The flooding story is still very much in the news this morning. The front page of New Telegraph says, flood. NCDC warns of possible disease outbreak in Borno, other states. And look at the riders as flood cuts off 5 Kaduna communities. Protect those living in floodplains, Pandef tells FG. APC seeks humanitarian assistance for victims. FG will partner states in combating menace, says Shatima. Presidency, National Assembly devising strategies to assist victims. That's coming from Abbas. That's the late story of New Telegraph newspaper this morning. If you look at the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper, Borno flood, over 30 confirmed dead, 1 million affected. Food shortage hits Maiduguri, 719 rescued from rooftops, trees. Trapped patients, residents seek urgent assistance. FG offers 3 billion naira support. On the front page, it continues, actually. All of that story you'll find on page 4 of Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Independent has something similar. Ravaging flood. Food scarcity hits Maiduguri as tomato farmers lose 1 billion naira. Over 1 million people are affected by the flood, according to Zulum. We rescued 719 victims on trees, rooftops, SEMA reveals. 49 killed, 226 communities affected in Kano floods. That story you'll find on page 29 of the Daily Independent newspaper this morning. Vanguard newspaper, IMF to FG, protect the poor from impact of petrol price hike. Says petrol still selling below market price. Calls for product availability, competition. IMF's right, according to experts. Find the details on the inside pages. The Daily Times newspaper has financial institutions must be part of counter-terrorism efforts, according to the NSA, says without funding, ability of terrorist organizations to recruit, train, execute their plans is severely weakened. If you look on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, listen, amid lean resources, FG spends 131 billion naira subsidizing VIP's protection yearly. And the graphics on the front page is of average NPF basic pay monthly. And according to the information on the front page, of the 400,000 policemen in the country, 150,000 officers are attached to VIPs and unauthorized persons. Questions? Find the details on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Nigerian Tribune is talking politics. Edo PDP threatens not to sign peace accord. Obaseki accuses police of waging war against party. Party labels REC Commissioner of Police Wike's associates. We have nothing to fear. INEC assures you have nothing to fear. INEC assures PDP extends PVC collection for 5 days. PDP's accusation attempts to stop investigation of killed policeman. That's coming from the IGP. We're satisfied with INEC police commitment to neutrality. That's from APC. Police to deploy 35,000 personnel. BVAS IREF compulsory in Edo, Ondo elections. That's coming from INEC. The details you'll find on the inside pages. Business Day newspaper has boon for Nigeria as Shell's $1.3 billion asset sale gets regulatory nod. Awaits Tinubu's consent as petroleum minister. The details on the front page, and it continues on the inside pages of the paper this morning. And these are some of the papers we have for you today.
With all of that, you see that one of the major stories on almost all the front pages of the papers is the flood situation. We'll take a quick break and come back on Sunrise Daily to continue our conversation. Go away.
Welcome back. A lot has happened in the past few days. And then we're seeing, the Tinubu administration is giving over 100 billion, 131 billion as bailouts for the floods in states in the country. And then, of course, we also heard from the Zamfara, what I keep saying Zamfara, the Borno State governor yesterday, saying 3 billion is what is given to them, to handle the flood situation in Borno. We're also seeing Kano State talking about how many people have been affected by floods since January, 49 people dead. In Kaduna State, there's also a flood situation going on in Lere local government area. It's cut off 5 communities. So what's happening to governance at state levels? Usually when the rains come, it's a sort of a litmus test of how you've done since the last rain. The issue is, after that, there are no consequences. You get the bailouts, and then life just keeps moving on until next year. Then we now hear of another flood and another bailout. The Tinubu administration and the way it is handling governance in Nigeria will be our focus this morning on the program. And joining us, Mr. Femi Aboishade, author and legal practitioner. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
So let's start our conversation this morning with your views on how governance is being done under the Tinubu administration. Where would you rate it right now?
That's a big question. I think, first of all, fundamentally, we need to understand the philosophical perspective of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to governance. And to understand him, we need to pay attention to a speech he made as president on the 31st day of July, 2023. In that statement, he said he was aware, and he has been repeating it, that he is aware that people are going through tough times, but that there is no alternative. In other words, there is no alternative to imposition of hardship. But the understanding of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu may also be deduced from the statement he made in 2012, when President Jonathan increased fuel price. And then Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu explained that it was a wicked policy. It amounted to tossing people into the midnight sea, and that it reflected the category of people, the class of people that the government of President Jonathan wanted to favor. The class of people President Jonathan wanted to support, and that fuel price increase was to increase the hardship on the people. That it was a political decision to favor a particular class of people. Therefore, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu reiterating in 2023, 31st of July, that there is no alternative to economic policies of hardship, means that it is a deliberate policy of his government to punish the people with the socio-economic policies being implemented by the regime. I think that is the background upon which we can assess all the policies of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. That understanding is important. The policies are deliberately made to favor what he called the European friends of President Jonathan, as against helping ordinary people.
The Tinubu administration is doing right now as well. Are you accusing him of doing the same thing that he accused former President Jonathan of doing?
Precisely. I'm using his ideas in explaining the policies of President Jonathan to explain the policies being implemented by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Well, for many people from the presidency, when they listen to Nigerians and of course people like you as well who complain about his policies and how these policies have impoverished or reduced the quality of life of Nigerians, one of the major things they keep talking about is how these were difficult decisions that needed to be made, and that we should be patient. That the El Dorado is still some ways ahead, but we are heading to El Dorado, and that we should be patient. This is a brave decision that would ultimately pull our country out of years of decay that could have, destroyed our nation. Hold on a little bit, it will be fine. You don't agree with that?
I don't agree, and I will further react by letting us know what is said as far as similar policies, the same policy really, of President Jonathan is concerned. He said, and permit me just to read, to summarize his point of view first, he said, government should save the poor, the people, rather than saving money. He said, and I quote, this is a statement he made in 2012. However, I'm quoting him now in 2012, because the distance between government and the people is far and genuine level of affection is low, government sees no utility in continuing to spend the current level of money on the people. In their mind, the people are not worth the money. Government sees more value in saving money than in saving the hard-pressed masses. That was President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in 2012. And he went further to say that, yet, what does government actually save this measure? The concept of a government that has the unfettered ability to print its own currency, needing to save the currency for fear of insolvency, is an anachronism. And he said, for a government that prints its own currency, attempting to save in that very currency in order to defend against bankruptcy in that currency is a relic of the past. So President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a very clear-headed person who understands the implications and the reasons why government implements certain policies.
That's a very interesting. I mean, I'm trying to soak it all in as you say it, but I want to be able to talk a little bit about fuel subsidy removal. And, that was the famous statement he made when he came into office on that day, that ground at Eagle Square, where he said subsidy is gone. And of course, over the months, we've been able to understand that, it wasn't budgeted for And he was basically just saying the facts, it's gone. It's not budgeted for, But, the question amongst many Nigerians is the fact that, okay, so subsidy is gone, which many people wanted. People protested asking for the subsidy regime to end. But that money was supposed to go into other areas. What areas have they gone into? Is there some kind of explanation as to where the money is right now? What do you make of that conversation?
Well, my position is that in the first place, I want to differ from you. I want to disagree with you. People did not protest against retention of subsidy. People have actually been protesting against removal of subsidy, to the best of my knowledge and practical involvement in those protests. But I think the question we should ask is, why is it that we need to import fuel? There is no basis for importation of fuel in the first place. The refineries owned by government ought to be working. And if crude oil is being refined in government-owned refineries, there will be no need for importation. Let us recall that in 1994, under General Abacha, fuel was being sold for 11 naira per liter. Out of 11 naira per liter, but 5.32 kobo, 5 naira 32 kobo was being saved and kept in what was called the Petroleum Trust Fund. In other words, from what people were paying for fuel, savings were being made, and the savings were being used for execution of projects in education, roads, healthcare, and so on. Therefore, importation is the key issue. And over $25 billion have been invested as of 2020 in turnaround maintenance. We have nothing to show for it. What government ought to do is to take the fight against corruption to the oil industry. But they find it difficult to take the fight against corruption to the oil industry. They find it convenient to punish the people. And let me also recall, in 2012, in writing, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu called on Nigerians. He said it was the duty of every Nigerian to come out and protest peacefully against removal of fuel subsidy, which he called then the Jonathan tax. So we are also compelled to resist the Tinubu tax.
Mr. Barishade, your assertions are quite interesting, and you have gone down history lane or memory lane to bring up some facts from the Abacha days and what was happening. But let's just stay in that down history memory lane and look at some of the things that Nigeria was able to produce and why you think, or why we're having the challenge of production at this point in time. Nigeria was a nation that was producing something, and we still have those raw materials. For instance, Nigeria is one of the largest producers of rubber, one of the largest producers of cocoa. We also have leather in Nigeria. We also have things that we could use to make products. What do you think is the biggest challenge? Because you said one of the biggest challenges of Nigeria is continuous importation. And that's one of the things that's weakening our naira. Why are we not producing? Why do you think it's so difficult for Nigerians to get back to the production line? And even where the industries are located, they're not able to do much. You'd still blame that on the government?
Of course, government is to dictate the direction of the economy. That is why we have a government. Any business today in the country that is not patronized by government may find it difficult to survive. But they are not interested in producing. As Peter Obi put it, the ruling class is more interested in consumption. To think about utilizing, engaging in manufacturing, developing the manufacturing sector. It is not of interest to them. They are prepared to play the role of what we call the comprador bourgeoisie, just taking the crumbs from the tables of the imperialists. They are prepared, they are happy, they are contented being the errand boys of a big international capital. So that is the problem. They are not interested in governance in the interest of the people. The Constitution provides that government shall own and control the major sectors of the economy so as to abolish poverty as stipulated in Section 15, sub 5 of the Constitution. But they are interested. They are prepared to cede the responsibility of government to the private sector to provide jobs. From their point of view, it is the responsibility of government. To provide health care, it is the responsibility of government. To provide education, it is the responsibility of government. In actual fact, recently, there is a statement which I downloaded and printed from the website of the presidency, wherein they have put for sale all tertiary institutions in the country. Universities, polytechnics, colleges of education. They are inviting the private sector, domestically and internationally, to come and buy the government-owned tertiary institutions. So the ruling classes in Nigeria appears to be an irresponsible, ruining class. I call them ruining class rather than ruling class, because they are not prepared to accept responsibility for public good, for education, for water, for jobs, for housing. Everything, they are putting it on the private sector. And the private sector intervention, private sector individuals and companies are not philanthropists. They want to make money. And when institutions, tertiary institutions are sold, universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education, only the children of the rich will be able to access education.
Mr. Borisade, if I may come in here, well, there's this school of thought that believes that the politicians are just a reflection of the society of Nigeria. You talked about the private sector, they just want to make money. So if someone from the private sector gets into office, the next thing he wants to do is to also make money. And so the corruption continues to perpetuate itself. So at what point do we say enough is enough? Can the society...
No.
Yes.
We should reject that practice, that perspective, because those who contest to come into public office, they do so on the basis of Section 14 sub 2B of the Constitution. Section 14 sub 2B of the Constitution provides that security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Therefore, government is not about making money. Government is not about enjoyment of the individuals in power. But unfortunately, the moment politicians get to power, first, they campaign because they want to improve the living standards of the people. But the moment they are in public office, they tend to use public office against public good. That is what we must fight against. And that is why Nigerians all over the country trooped out, protesting against the imposition of, the increase in fuel price, to the point that people are saying they are hungry. You are in power not to starve us, you are in power to implement policies and programs to feed us, to provide opportunities for jobs. In actual fact, according to the Constitution, government has a responsibility to either provide jobs or provide unemployment allowance. Government has a responsibility to pay a national minimum living wage and not to allow people to go hungry. So all over the country, people trooped out saying they are hungry. Ebing Power in Yoruba, in Hausa, Munajin Yuwa, and in Igbo, the same thing, the protests all over the country.
The one in
Unfortunately,
Igbo. I'm going to give you the one in Igbo. Agum. Agum. Yes. Let's not leave them out. But I want Agum.
Anago. Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want us to be able to talk more about where we are. I mean, listening to you, of course, we've heard these things before. And just so we can get that correction, yes, you are correct. Protests were against the removal of fuel subsidy. But of course, we did hear, protests don't have to be on the street all the time. We did hear many people talk about how this regime is corrupt. It's not helping the country. This is a bad idea. How do we get this over with? Okay, now we are where we are. And I think someone said they're going to put that thing next to my face somewhere. We are. This is the situation now. What is the way forward? Because we can't change the past. I can't go back. We can't go back and, change anything that's already happened. What should happen now? Should the fuel subsidy regime come back? Should there be some kind of rejigging of the Tinubu cabinet? Where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, about fuel subsidy. In reality, there is no basis for subsidy if we removed corruption. Subsidy is just subsidizing corruption. I gave the example of 1994 under Abacha. There was no question about subsidy. The problem is that successive Nigerian governments are not prepared to ensure that we refine crude oil in government-owned refineries. And that is what we must insist they do. And rather than imposing economic hardship on the people while they are living large, we are saying that we should develop, those in power should develop a people-oriented philosophical perspective. Rather, they are living large. In a situation in which they say the economy is bad, we have a situation in which the president has just bought a new jet for $150 million. Presidential yacht of 5 billion naira. Cars for the first lady, 1.5 billion naira. To renovate VP house, 21 billion naira. SOPs for the National Assembly, 160 million. Presidential Tax Reform Committee, made up of less than 20 persons, 5 billion naira. First Lady decoration of event for the First Lady. In 5 days alone, $250 million. Yet, the school fees has been increased, education has collapsed, healthcare has collapsed, there are no jobs, hike in electricity tariff, and so on. So we must insist that government should be guided by Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution. Security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Where a government fails to actualize Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution, then the solution lies in the people, resorting to the provision of Section 40 of the Constitution, which I call the peaceful revolt provision. To gather peacefully and protest peacefully that government should be sensitive. Unfortunately, as we have seen, government has not been able to actualize Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution. Those who protested, government has arrested some of them and charged them for treason and terrorism. But peaceful protest under the Constitution is a fundamental right. It can never amount to treason. Peaceful protest can never amount to terrorism. So in my own opinion, any government that is unable to govern in accordance with Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution has lost all the legitimacy to remain in power. And for as long as people protest peacefully, they have a right to say that particular government should resign, should either change its policies or resign. It is within their fundamental right to so do, provided they protest peacefully.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bruchard. You know, the question that comes to my mind, and I'm happy that you went back in time to look at some of the things that got us here. One of the questions that I've always asked is along the line of the fact that the people who are in government today were not in government 40 years ago. In fact, I mean, when you're talking about the fact that some Nigerians, they tend to enjoy or prefer, or government tends to enjoy or prefer imported stuff as opposed to things that are made in Nigeria or facilitating production in the country. I remember a speech I read, I've been looking for it, I can't find it again, of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, before the 1960 independence, addressing students in the UK, Nigerian students in the UK, that their leaders preferred imported stuff as opposed to locally produced stuff. So it seems like a systemic thing. And irrespective of whichever government comes into power, it would seem like it's either we do that or, we really look for some big stick to do something. How do you see us getting into that space of patriotism, where no matter where you are in the country, be it at the federal level or at the state level, Nigeria comes before your pocket? Do you see that happening?
If ordinary people insist that governance should be about their interests, for now, governance or governments government has been hijacked. It is a conspiracy against the interests of the people. And that is why we must insist that if people want imported their stuffs at their own expense, they may do so. But the moment you are in power, the moment you are in public office, you cannot be allowed to waste public resources. Let me say this. In 2003, Chief Gani Fawemi contested to be president of Nigeria. I contested to be governor of Oyo State. At the same time, Femi Falana contested to be governor of Ekiti State. Ozaki Obayuana contested to be governor of Edo State. The current governor of Kaduna State also contested to be governor of Kaduna State. The point I want to make is that we signed an undertaking. Chief Gani Fawemi was always going abroad at his own expense for medical treatment, at his own expense. But he signed an undertaking that the moment, if he were elected as president of Nigeria, he will seek medical treatment, medical care in government-owned hospitals. And that will compel government to commit resources to transforming the public hospitals. In the same way, the undertaking also included that our children will not receive education abroad, that we will not use generator to provide electricity. So these were some of the points that were contained in that undertaking. Today, the story is different. Those in power prefer to embark on medical tourism, neglecting ordinary people to the collapsed healthcare system. My suggestion would be that it should be incorporated into the Constitution. Whatever position you wish to contest for, whatever office you may occupy as an elective office or officer, you can only earn the national minimum living wage, whatever the figure may be. Those who are not prepared to earn the national minimum wage should not dare to contest. In 2003, when I contested to be governor of Oyo State, I did so on a program of a governor on a worker's wage. So these are the kinds of policies that we can adopt in order to discourage people who only want to serve their pockets rather than serving the people. In order to discourage people who want to use public office against public good.
Well, Mr. Aburushade, just one other thing, perhaps in that same line. A good number of Nigerians have been wondering how come, even now, because you see, for me, whatever government is doing, we complain only about the president most of the time. When it was Jonathan, everyone was calling Jonathan's name. When it was Buhari, everyone was calling Buhari's name. When it was Obasanjo, when it was Yaradua, everybody calls only the president. No one is, well, we rarely call out the governors, and there are 36 of them. Anytime we have elections, the governors are sworn in. We always have governors. And it would seem like no matter what any president is doing, because it's only after, you know, Chief Obasanjo left government that people were saying, oh, he really did well. He did this and he did this and he did that. And then that this guy is in office now and then there is a problem. We praise our presidents only when they have left office. But the governors, the state governments, they are the ones that are supposed to cascade some of the initiatives of the federal government to their states. A case in point, in 2021, the federal government came up with this initiative of Economic Sustainability Plan. And part of the initiatives there was that in partnership with the states, that the government should do this, the government should do that. President Buhari said, I think it was in 2019 or thereabout, that in partnership with the states, we can take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in partnership with the states. Do you see that partnership between federal government and the state government happen?
Yes, I think that is a very good idea, which governments, federal, state, local government ought to pursue. In natural fact, there ought to be a consensus that resources should be budgeted for the critical basic needs of ordinary people before they talk about their greed. So that on a national basis, we set aside resources for education, for healthcare, for government-owned companies, and so on, electricity, and so on, roads, education. It is whatever is now left that may be used in paying salaries of those who occupy public office. But today, those who are governing us, they prioritize their greed over the needs of ordinary people. The reverse should be the case. And that reverse should be that there should be a national consensus on the priorities, so that regardless of where anybody may come from, regardless of where any child may come from, access to education as provided under Section 18, sub 3, should be guaranteed. Free and qualitative education, medical care, and so on. So I agree that is the project government ought to pursue, but they are not pursuing that. Now, they are not interested in that.
Speaking in the same space, I remember this president, when he hosted some people in the presidential villa, you know, was addressing them, and I think it was the traditional rulers, asking them to call out the governors, particularly in concerning the local government administrations. Now, the reason I'm asking this question with our eyes squarely on the Tinubu administration is that it is when we expect one human being to do whatever it is that we expect him to do, even though he swore, by the Constitution and by whatever means to uphold the Constitution, at the end of the day, one human being cannot police effectively almost 1,500 ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as corporations of the federal government. But then we also have 3 tiers of government. We have local government administrations. And the president at the time was saying to his guests, we should call out the governors concerning the local government administrations. Do you see that happening? How do you see the various traditional rulers, the various community development associations holding their state governors account, particularly as it concerns local government administrations, which the federal government has won a case at the Supreme Court about?
Yes, I think I agree with you absolutely. We face that challenge of challenging, holding to account those who are governing at lower levels of government at the state and local governments. That is a challenge that should be embraced, not only by traditional rulers, because the traditional rulers, may not have the capacity to advise governors or even chairmen of local governments, because many of them, live at their pleasure, at the pleasure of governors and chairmen of local governments. They are paid salaries and they are ordered about, they are hardly respected. But civil society should take more interest in holding state governments and local governments to account, particularly now in the context of the judgments of the Supreme Court that has tried to salvage the local governments from the control of governors in terms of allocations to the local governments. Even though I'm aware that in a state like Oyo State, the local governments are saying no, they prefer enslavement of the governor. They don't need the freedom. But that also talks to the manner in which they get to office, because many of them, if they are in office on the basis of the support, godfatherism of the governor, it may be difficult to go against the governor. In actual fact, for some of them, they may just receive their allocation and just hand it over to the governor, asking the governor to direct them the best way.
If we're discussing Nigeria's matter, we need more time. We need a lot of time to really fully understand all the nooks and crannies of our issue. But unfortunately, that's where we have to wrap up our conversation with you this morning. Hopefully, we'll have more conversations with you soon. Thank you so much for being with us on the program this morning.
Very much. It'll always be a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Mr. Femi Aboishade, the author and legal practitioner. We'll go on a commercial break right now. And at the top of the hour, we have business right here on Sunrise Day. So please stay with us. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. We do just about 30 minutes of business before we head back to the Sunrise Daily studio. We'll start from the global space. Oil prices rose during Asian trade on Thursday and spurred by concerns of Hurricane Francine as impacting output in the United States, which is the world's biggest crude producer. The worries of lower demand capped gains. We got our eyes on the number now, and this morning we're looking at November futures as well as October futures. For Brent, it's November futures. It's up 40 cents. 40 cents is about 0.6%, bringing it up to $71.01 a barrel for Brent. WTI, on the other hand, is up 0.5%, and that's about 32 cents. That's what it gained to get to $67.63. Of course, a major driver is that Hurricane Francine, which has been threatening the coast of the United States. And then also in the United States, oil stockpiles rose across the board. That was reported by the Energy Information Administration. Crude imports grew and exports dipped. Then the data also showed that gasoline demand fell to its lowest since May. At the same time, distillate fuel demand dropped, with refinery runs also declining. Noting that the United States is the world's biggest oil consumer, so whatever move or data we get from there certainly affects the global oil prices. Now in Nigeria, but still within the oil space, now the NUPRC has denied reports that it approved the sale of Egypt to. Just a minute, please. All right, we'll get back to that story in a bit, but let's look at the Naira now and see what happened yesterday at the close of trade. There was an intervention from the Central Bank of Nigeria. Let's have the Naira. We'll go back to the NUPL story in a bit. There was an intervention by the Central Bank of Nigeria, but in spite of that, there was a weakening at NAFEX at the close of trade. We saw it dropped 1.45%, but we always tell you to keep our eyes on NAFEM. That's where the real value is. So on NAFEM, there was a gain of 1.37. So it opened at 1,580 naira 46 kobo, but closed at 1,558 naira 75 kobo at the close of trade on NAFEM. So that's what happened. A bit of appreciation right there, but because of the intervention from the central bank, I think that's the second intervention we've had this week, and we'll see how that goes. This was expected or factored in by traders, but I mean, well, I guess our reserves are looking good, and we're just done with the $900 million dollar bond. So we have the ability, the central bank has the ability to intervene in the market. Now let's go back to that NUPRC story. The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, the NUPRC, has denied reports that it has approved Shell International's $1.3 billion sale of its onshore assets to Renaissance. NUPRC clarifies that these reports suggesting that the Commission's approval of the transaction involving Shell's 75-year-old onshore asset are incorrect and not from the Commission. Earlier reports had showed that the deal had received initial approval under the Petroleum Industry Act and awaited final confirmation from President Bola Tinubu. The NUPRC says this is not true and that they remain committed to transparency and will issue an official statement to the transaction or on the transaction in due course. Once again, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NUPRC Commission. I guess I woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. Please forgive me. The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission has denied reports that it has approved Shell International's $1.3 billion sale of its onshore assets of Renaissance. So they say it's not true. If you heard that story, please do cast it out. It did not happen, or it did not come from them. Now, moving on the program now, Nigeria has recorded a trade surplus of 6.95 trillion naira in the second quarter of 2024, driven by strong export performance, and that's despite a slight decline in the total merchandise trade. The surplus marks a 6.6% increase from the previous quarter. Exports, particularly crude oil, played a key role, with a total reaching 19.42 trillion naira. That's a 1.31% increase from the first quarter. Major export partners include Spain, the United States, France. However, imports fell to 12.47 trillion naira. That's a 10.71% drop from the previous quarter. China, however, remains Nigeria's top import supplier, followed by Belgium and India. The strong export numbers ensured a favorable trade balance for the country. Now, food insecurity or food security, food supply in the country is a major one for the country, and we've seen efforts by the federal government to boost food supply. The latest is distribution of fertilizer to farmers in the southwestern part of the country. It was of here in Lagos. I will bring you the report And subsequently, they promised that there are more incentives for farmers in the other parts of the country. Farmers involved in different crop and animal production are here at the instance of the flag off of the distribution of fertilizers to Southwest farmers by the federal government. It's a good place to share challenges experienced in the process of ensuring food supply in the country.
If the government can help us, maybe assessing all those land, like we said, Afan has 57 SCDA in Lagos State. If Lagos State can have like 1,000 hectares of land and say, okay, like all our LGA, we give them 10 hectares as a cluster farming, and the government can come in to help us in the clearing of land, because that has been the major challenge. When you try to assess those land individually, clearing land has always been a challenge, and government come in this area to help us.
Mr. Rafiu,
ideas shared can be implemented by the same farmers.
I am also a poultry farmer, and I can tell you our price of feed increases from 18,000 to 28,000 almost every week. The only way we can solve it, man, there's no magical. It's when you improve or you increase production and soya.
The purpose of the meeting is next. Fertilizers are distributed to screened farmers. The representative of the Special Advisor to the President on Agriculture says there are plans for even more incentives.
So this is the beginning. So the President is going to bring in so many interventions into the Southwest. So the President is going to support the husbandry sector, is going to support the fisheries. So there are so many interventions on the way. So we use this medium to thank the President. So the President did bring us in from the private sectors so that we can actually make sure this fertilizer get to the hands of the main farmers.
The threat of food insecurity is real in Nigeria, and seemingly little efforts and ideas carried out here hold the potential to contribute to supply. Let's go break now. When we come back, we'll head to the commodities space. I think we'll keep our eyes today. Let's leave the food for a bit and look at oil and what that's doing. We see crude is a major exporter that drove that our trade surplus. We'll talk about that after the break. Just stay with us. Welcome back to watching Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. Let's go to the commodities space now. We'll keep our eyes on the oil now. We see that trade surplus that Nigeria recorded, and we see that crude played a key role with a total reaching 19.42 trillion naira. That's an increase of 1.31%. And of course, we did see from OPEC that our production in August also went up more than 3% to 1.35. Congratulations to Nigeria. Now we see what's going on with the oil prices. Brent is below 80, which is like a normal level, a resistance level for that commodity. Let's find out what all of this means to Nigeria. And we're discussing with Victoria Momo. She's a senior analyst with financial derivatives company. Victoria, good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning, Ine. Thank you for having me.
So Hurricane Francine is causing an increase in oil prices, yet it is below, what we normally call the normal prices. What does this mean to Nigeria? Seeing that from this trade surplus number, crude is still a major export for Nigeria. What does it mean for our revenue?
Thank you very much for your question, Ine. So we've seen that oil prices have increased recently, and we would attribute that to the supply shortages that that the global market is currently facing. In the US, there is the issue of hurricane that is impacting oil output because there are production shut-ins across some oil facility. So that is driving the global oil price of Brent. But I would like to inform you that actually this increase in Brent prices could be temporary because we have more pressures from the demand side. That is weak demand from China, and also the anticipation that OPEC would actually increase the oil supply in the global market. So that could drive down prices. We've seen, major companies actually reduce the oil price forecast for 2024, and that implies that oil prices are likely to fall. Interestingly, we saw that crude oil actually contributed to our export earnings, right? About 74% of our export earnings. So that implies depend or rely on crude oil for our foreign exchange earnings. So if global oil prices actually declines, it implies that our earnings from crude would actually reduce, and that is negative for our foreign exchange earnings and even the naira presently. A decline in limits the amount that would actually be set aside for the CBN to intervene in the forex market, and that could even worsen the pressures on the naira.
But I guess we should try to find a balance. So if our exports of crude reduces, because we have demands, domestic demands for refineries, from refineries, we have Dangote and the modular refineries who are asking for more crude. If our earnings from exporting crude reduces because we are satisfying domestic demand, what impact can that have? Wouldn't that be a positive impact, because it's going to also reduce the demand for FX anyway?
Yeah, so that is a very interesting question. So we export crude and we also import, refined crude. And from the statistics, we find out that, fuel products import actually topped the products that we actually imported in the country in Q2. So that implies that we are importing refined crude. So with the Dangote refineries and other refineries actually, producing petroleum products, we could see that reduction in pressures for, forex demand to meet our exports, basically. So it means that the money that would otherwise be used to import these commodities into the country would actually be used for, other investment and basically in the country. So there is the positive aspect of that in terms of this crude being sold to the refineries to produce refined crude, and then it can meet our demand, our daily demand for petroleum products, and reduce the need to import. So that means the pressure on the forex needed to import this refined crude into the country is actually going to reduce, and also ease the naira basically.
And we see crude improving. We hope that is sustained. We saw about 3.4% or so increase in our August production to 1.35. We haven't hit the 1.5 yet, but I mean, I guess if we can continue this in this trajectory, we could actually have some succor for especially the domestic refiners and energy security and supply in the country.
Yes, that is actually very correct. Like in August, we actually recorded increase in crude. So that implies that there are still efforts to actually curb the challenges that it's currently facing, the oil sector. That is the crude oil theft, the pipeline vandalism. And then with the onset of, this refineries and also the surveillance that are being kept to ensure that these challenges are being curtailed, we would see the increase in crude production. But basically this crude production still remains far below our budget benchmark of about 1.78 million barrels per day, and even OPEC quota. So that implies that we are still producing suboptimally, and that could limit the earnings that we could get from exporting crude out of the country. And that implies that we need to still work to improve crude oil supply in the country in order to attract more foreign exchange into the country. And also that would to a large extent, like I said, strengthen the naira, boost our external reserves, and also add additional forex to the government to carry out a series of investment, productive investment that could ease the pressure on an average Nigerian and on businesses that are currently being challenged by numerous structural issues and challenges that weigh on their productivity level, profitability level, and many others.
All right, Victoria, thank you so much. We certainly do hope that the improvement is sustained. We have more crude, and we also reduce our imports of refined petroleum product. Thank you so much, senior analyst with a financial derivatives company.
Thank you for having me.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the bonds, the dollar bond. A success for the federal government, but really, how do we define that success? We'll talk about that after the break.
34 million hectares of arable land. Over 200 million people. One nation. Home to Africa's fertilizer company. Fertilizer, pure urea fertilizer. With one single-minded passion to feed Nigeria. Every bag is a potential, an aspiration to turn this green nation into the biggest food basket of Africa. Dangote Fertilizer.
Beat Crystal Original. Get a pen you can rely on.
Welcome back to Watching Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. Let's head to the bond space now, the financial market. A success for the federal government. They set out to get $500 million, the very first domestic dollar bond, but they got $900 million subscription. And the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, said that the result of this is a historic bond issuance, that it shows that investors have a lot of confidence in Nigeria. Now, let's discuss more about this with the Chief Dealer Treasury, Polaris Bank Limited, Mr. Bankole Dusoya. Mr. Dusoya joins us in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Dusoya.
Good morning, Ini.
I say congratulations. Yeah, we went out for $500 million and we got $900 million.
Yes, that's
yeah, so, I mean, everybody's happy about that, especially the government. But some people are thinking of the costs of this. So they now have $900 million. This is not free money. This is investment from members of the private sector, you know, individuals or institutional investors. So if we could have what this means, the costs, we could have that slide, please. So there you have it, the cost of this to the government. So while we are celebrating $900 million, it does mean the rate is 9.75, wow, yes. Yeah. And this is from Mr. Bankole. They are the ones who deal with those numbers. Yeah. So annually, the federal government will have to pay this $87.75 million to the investors.
Yes.
They have to pay this beginning from when?
It's from March.
March next year. Okay,
and
so they
paid twice
a year.
March
so
and September.
They'll do March 2025 and then September 2025.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's dividing that into like two.
Yes.
So you do $43.8 million. Yeah, in March and September to the investors. Good investment for me. Yeah, if I was able to raise $10,000, I think the least you could do was $10,000.
$10,000.
Okay.
So that that was the major advantage, because now we're dealing with domestic investors.
Yeah.
So this cost you're paying out is paying back to people who invested locally. Yeah. So it's not necessarily capital flight out of the country. So that's one way of seeing it. And then the other one is that, I mean, we need to look at the infrastructure gap and why they're raising these funds. I mean,
so before we get there, so this is what they'll pay annually.
Yes.
For 5 years, it's a 5-year security.
Oh, yes.
For 5 years, they pay $87.75 to the investors, divided into twice in a month and in a year. And then by the 5th year, they return back the 900.
The entire capital, yes.
Do we know how much this will cost at the end of 5 years, the federal government? So that would be 900 plus what this times 5.
5 years, that's it, roughly. That gives you about $400 million on top of that.
Okay, so 400 million.
An estimate of over 400 million. That takes us to about 1.3, 1.4 billion.
Well, about 1.3?
1.4 billion.
Billion. Yes. 1.4 billion.
Around
about 1.4 billion.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what the government will pay for this $900 million so that means the government should be able to generate at least $1.5 billion from this in 5 years.
Oh yes, the cost-benefit analysis must have been done. Like I said, we have a lot of infrastructural gap that is yet to be met, and then we're looking. Look at the situation in Borno State, the dam that has just collapsed. We have a lot of such that needs to be fixed or even expanded. And then going into the agricultural space, we're talking of insecurity on one end, of course, equipping the armed forces is one. On the other hand, it's about making sure the rail structure that we have presently is expanded into the interiors to help bring out goods and then help with silos and then processes, semi-processing of agro products so that we can improve on our non-oil exports. When the non-oil export expands, you'll see that our export proceeds in dollars is expanding. So we are not just simply hooked to the fate of the crude oil pricing. You can see that crude oil price has dropped from $80 below $70. So diversifying away from crude oil export proceeds is very important, and these are the kind of funds you need to reinvest into power sector, irrigation, agriculture, defense. So these are the cost-benefit analysis that would have been done before raising these funds.
But the thing is, we do not exactly know what or where this is going to be channeled. What we heard from the minister is that it will be channeled into strategic economic sectors based on the approval of the president. And this is where worries come in and questions come in. Shouldn't these projects that this would be channeled into, for us to be able to reach at least part of that $1.5 billion in 5 years, shouldn't those projects be outlined? I know it's not Sukuk. It's Sukuk you have, very outlined.
Specified.
Yes.
Those are tied to projects.
Yes.
Yes.
But don't you think that perhaps if that was done, so a Nigerian who has invested in this becomes not just an investor who wants to make profit, but also a contributor to the development of all this infrastructure that you're talking about. Because even up to now, we don't know what exactly they want to use it for. They just told us it to be channeled into strategic economic sectors approved by the president.
Yeah, ordinarily, if we go back to the budget of 2024 and the summary, and there were specifics when it came to critical sectors. It was defense and agriculture in particular. Of course, we had to secure the farmlands, and then, like I said, improve on infrastructure that helps to bring out and quickly the products, and then also help with processing and then storage, because we have a lot of loss of
post-harvest losses.
Post-harvest losses, which is a very big problem. So basically, diversifying away from crude oil it's been a critical sector in the mind of the government, and they've always spoken about that. So basically, it's in the budget. They're just trying to cover the gap, the deficit, the budget deficit, by raising this kind of fund, and then basically not going to the Eurobonds market, where we saw what happened. Rates were as high as double digits, number one. Number two, between the NNPC and Afrexim, the last cost of fund was about 11.75. So this is cheaper. And then going into next year, there's a likelihood that the DMO would raise this fund
because they're still going to $2 billion.
They're going to $2 billion, and with the challenge I'm seeing with Borno State dam collapsing, they may even expand that portfolio of debt stock they're trying to raise. But if the US Fed sits this month of September, there's a likelihood of rate reduction and then the multiplier effect globally. So this 9.7 could as well probably just drop to 8.75 or even lower going into next year.
Does that mean the Naira is going to depreciate further?
No, that's not dependent on that. We're talking of cost of borrowing in USD going down, and then we locally have an option rather than going to the Eurobonds market internationally. This fund was raised from domestic investors exclusively, so that's an option. We didn't used to have this option, or we never explored it. So this time around, we're seeing that it was largely oversubscribed. Number one, it showed liquidity. Number two, it showed trust that domestic investors were willing to invest in their own sovereign.
I guess is the use that we're waiting for now. I know you said, yes, obviously.
It's documented in the budget.
It's documented in the budget, but I mean.
The critical sector are defense, agriculture, education, and health.
Okay, all right. So we'll follow up in the next 5 years. Yes. You understand, to see.
On a yearly basis, budget achievement, we need to engage. So those who have concerns have genuine concerns. It's true that the concerns are there. We need to see budget achievement with vis-a-vis the amount that has been raised. That's what we need to ask, because they would spending this money on projects that have been highlighted in the budget and broken down per ministry.
And not personnel expenses.
No, hopefully not.
Okay, but I mean, I know you said it's cheaper money for the government, but it still increases our debt servicing.
Oh yes.
But we are still around the safe space.
Yeah, that's your debt. Your debt servicing versus revenue is very high. But debt to GDP is still okay by the economic definition.
Should we be worried?
We should be, that we are growing, because year to date we have spent $2.8 billion on debt servicing. Before the end of the year, that could get to $3 billion, and this is coming in March next year. So what we have to focus on is the benefit that would accrue from these borrowings. We must ensure that these funds are spent for, like you said, critical sector funding, covering the gaps and ensuring that we become productive, especially in non-oil sector, so that we're not just fully dependent on oil pricing. That we saw what happened in 2020 when crude oil price dropped to below $40 and $30 per barrel. We do not want that again. We want to be a diverse economy that produces and then earns from multiple of sources. So basically, this should be funding that gap and not necessarily depending on oil prices dropped from 100 to 68. I mean, the worry won't be there if we are very productive on the non-oil sector side of it.
Yeah, well, that's honestly what we all hope for. It's just that when you look at the reality, yesterday we had an exporter here, and he was telling us some of the realities that they face as exporters. So we keep talking about the ease of doing business, yet issues are still abound. He was talking particularly about the folks on the road who disturb them. They have to pay. He said in Lagos, if you're heading to Apapa, he pays there are about 35 spots, and they have to pay 5,000 naira to each of those. Now, this has been brought to the attention of the government. You know, if we say we want to improve our non-oil exports, these are the issues we need to handle. You mentioned security. We know what's happening to agriculture. The reality of it, farmers are not going to the farm, you know. Oil exports. Agriculture serves as raw material for huge industry in the country. And yet, we are still dealing with the basic, which is food. Not to mention the value chain, adding value and all of that. So these are realities. And I guess that's why the people want to know, while we celebrate the success of getting 900 million, heading to $2 billion, can we exactly know what project this is going into? Not just, you know, critical sectors. We know the problems, they've been there, they've been in the budget since the beginning, but how do we follow up and track up, you know, that this is being efficiently used?
Yeah, the concerns are rife. Imagine the exporters being able to move their goods on rail. It's going to be faster and more secured. Right now, of course, the security agencies have to bother with, you know, disturbances here and there on the roads, but if we were able to expand the rail structure to accommodate export agro products, then that would be very good. And then also we shouldn't be having tankers moving petroleum products also around the country. It's not efficient, it's expensive, and it's also very dangerous. We see the accident we saw happen in Kogi or in Niger State a few days ago. So basically, we should be expanding our capacity to transport on rail, not just human traffic, but also products, basically. So these are the kind of questions and pressure we should be putting on government, that these funds should be going to rail transport of non-oil products. basically. So the concerns are rife.
The other side is the FX issue. We've seen, I think we've had 2 interventions from the CBN this week.
Oh, yes.
Last week we had one to the BDCs.
Yes.
And then we see when they don't intervene, the Naira drops. When they do, there's a boost. So a lot of people have said, well, it's a managed floating system that we're working with. And as they say, no country truly leaves the currency, to the demand and supply. But are we in a good place at this time?
We're at a better place compared to where we were a few years ago.
Few years or few months?
Few years, few months ago. Because what we're seeing now is CBN intervening when there's need, and not just coming, at a calendar period. So basically, they just intervene when there's, need to do that. And what is happening is that we're seeing a lot of letters of credit that were open half year come to mature. So there's a lot of demand for dollars, and then going into end of year also. Those who want to bring in wares for end of the year are also seeking for funds. This period we are currently at the period where the school fees being paid by a lot of people locally, and then schools.
Is that a factor? I was told it's not really a factor.
It's not a major factor, but it's just one of it.
But it's a factor to the retail investors.
The retail market, where the BDCs need money to sort out something. So basically, the CBN has been intervening when there's need, and then it's kept the rate stable basically, and then we have a liquid market. Compared to last year, 2 years ago, we have a liquid market. The issue at hand right now is pricing. So we have moved away from illiquidity.
Reduction of the gap.
We have moved away from illiquidity to a liquid market where pricing is the issue, and then central bank would usually come in to ensure that pricing is stable, because most investors want a stable environment where you can plan that if I come into Nigeria, I buy a treasury bill for 1 year, by next year when I'm leaving, I'm not far off where I came in. So stability is key. In that instance.
Then the gap between the parallel and the official market, that has also...
It's thinned out to about 100 Naira. It used to be about 100% when we were at 400 to 700.
Yes, so we are in a safe place.
It's safer, definitely.
At least we can count some gains of the reforms.
Yes.
Of the reforms.
Yes, you can. It's tough. You can't deny that. But comparing to where we are, it's more stable environment to play in right now compared to where we are. And that's because of the CBN policies and interventions we've seen so far, to be honest.
Yeah, but we still have a lot to do, especially from the fiscal side. Thank you so much, Chief Dealer Treasury, Polaris Bank Limited, Mr. Bankole Odusanya. Thank you. Thank you for the numbers.
Thank you.
Through the calculation.
All right, thank you.
All right. $900 million is going to cost the government about $1.5 billion in 5 years. That's what investors will take at the end of the day, the cost of that. But as Mr. Odusanya said, we do hope that actually it's channeled to those really critical areas that will boost economic activities, and the economy can generate more than 1.5 billion in 5 years, if that's well used. Now, just before we head back to the Sunrise Daily Studio, let's give you market numbers yesterday. It was just a very dead cat bounce is what they call it. Just one recovery, and then we're back to the red zone. That's what we had at the close of trade yesterday. 0.09% in the red is the all-share index, 55.575 trillion naira. The equities cap, and the market lost 51 billion naira. Doesn't sound like a lot, but dragged the market down. And guess who did that again? Our friend O&O. O&O has been in the news since after that acquisition was completed. But the activity chart we see was mixed yesterday. 600 in volume, 8.81 in billion in value, and deals 9,546 at the close of trade. Sectors, banking is back. I think UBA contributed to that. It's been a while since we had that UBA. So up 0.64. Consumer goods, Dangote Sugar. We're happy for investors in Dangote Sugar. There's been a lot of profit taken on Dangote Sugar, but yesterday there was a recovery. So they contributed to this positive number. Industrial goods slightly up. Insurance not been getting a lot of good attention recently. Then oil and gas, in spite of the fact that O&O was in the red, we saw Seplat drove this yesterday, 1.73% of the oil and gas. Top trades, Jaiz Bank, UBA, Accessco, the financial sector, they contributed to that. And the smaller markets yesterday was also positive. And well, we'll give you more information from the market and from the world of business at 1 p.m. Ladi will be here. Ladi Williams with Anite Edet. They'll both take you around the world of business in 55 minutes. I'm Yini John McQuarrie. Let's head back to the Sunrise Daily Studio.
Well, since it's business, you owe me 10 minutes. And of course, maybe some other time we'll take that. Well, so business morning, that was. Now, we have with us in the studio the former deputy president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Amaechi Astugune. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Ayo.
Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? A number of people must have seen that video of the event that the president of the NLC ought to have attended, and what was going on there, comments being made, and about the fact that the president of the NLC in Nigeria couldn't make it to that meeting. And then, of course, all the issues that are ongoing about that. First of all, your reaction to that comment from a global scene.
Yes, I think from the report and the happenings around Nigeria generally, and it has affected Nigeria Labour Congress. In fact, I would say trade union movement. That very sign was not healthy. Integrity-wise, both as a country, both as organized labor, because whether we like it or not, when trade union of a particular country is doing well, it is viewed and perceived that the country is doing well. And any harassment or assault on institution leaders, it also defines the level of democracy and the rule of law we actually permit as a country. So the way that very invitation, excuse me, and arrest was conducted, it did not display professionalism, it did not display respect for rule of law, it did not also show that we actually are willing to get it done better soon. Because when you perceive some things in 2024, in this century, we can register that kind of harassment or system of arrest as though we are referring to a criminal that was on the run. He didn't tell well about Nigeria, not just NLC. So global-wise, it was condemned. It is viral. Even there, they acknowledge that such is a threat to labor voice and it's a threat to democracy. It was widely condemned, and it's unnecessary. That would have been prevented.
Now, so on the one hand, the government said that there was an invitation sent to the NLC president. On the other hand, the NLC is saying no, there was no such invitation. But then there is also the position of the presidency that, look, because of the allegations, no one is above the law. Was it wrong of the federal government to have invited the president of the NLC at all?
Never. Anybody except for immunity purpose must be subject to the law, including NLC president, even 10 times in a day, if that becomes necessary. Nobody can promote a situation of anarchy. When people are above the law, then they are leading themselves. So we are all governed by constitution. But the question is, for any step to be taken, one step would have been taken. It's like the medical field. You explain to your doctor, and they prescribe some basic step to be taken.
Sorry, Mr. Smith. Just so I understand what you're saying. You say no one is above the law.
Never.
So anyone can be invited by the president or by the federal government, any agency of government at any time. So when the police, I think it was, that invited the president of the NLC, previously, to come for a chat, was that out of place?
The invitation was not out of place, and they honored the invitation.
Okay. So, but then there was such a lot of noise made prior to his granting that invitation.
Because of prior step before the invitation, whereby we had a raid at the NLC complex, or call it secretariat. whether it happened on the second floor, whether it happened on the first floor, that the target, even via media, captured police or DSS or Joint Task Force raid NLC. Thereafter, after 48 hours, information started reflecting that the idea was not NLC, it was a tenant. And upon the invitation or the discovery in their own investigation, NLC was now put on notice for invitation. That was why you see the reaction when people say terrorism allegation. So he created a lot of discourse even before the arrival of NLC to the police. But eventually he was advised, because you have been invited, responsibly you need to make yourself available. And which he did. I think he was accompanied by some lawyers to also show that whichever way they want to take it, they are there to possibly grant him bail and charge any matter you want to charge to court. Eventually that one was treated as though information was not sufficient, evidence was not sufficient to detain him beyond necessary for questioning. Then the next was DSS arresting him on his way to attend international program. That was, how do you reconcile the previous, as if it was the police who did the first invitation that is now saying, we expect you to have reported on a certain date you didn't come. And that is why we are making this arrest, because more or less you have defaulted. This is a different agency who felt also that they sent invitation like some part of the story has it, but evidently there's no acknowledgement that has been displayed anywhere. NLC was never in receipt of any invitation. NLC was never invited, and the next was accosted, arrested on your way to your trip. That looked very suspicious. It looked scary to democratic nation, and that is why you see international everywhere, they are commenting, condemning it. Even it's not even a good name for a president, because there are certain things that will happen. People will think the order is from above. And so, considering that there is a change of government or change of leadership in DSS, and the perception I have about the new DG is somebody who don't tolerate nonsense. It means such person must be rooted with the rules of the game. So first is extend your invitation. I know DSS have capacity to know your plan ahead, to know that you're about to leave Nigeria. If you don't have, that is the agency I respect so strong in this country about intelligence. So the capacity to dictate that the president was traveling is something I know at the tip of their table. They should be able to know that he will leave Nigeria. But the question is, before that day of travel, they would have extended even his 3 hours invitation that we need to see you, whereby it's not deferring that very appearance to now go to the airport. It looked like you're escaping. So the arrest will now be corresponding to the invitation. But they didn't do this, and they have just created an impression so ugly about our security system. And I think it can be reformed. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the new DG, because the information out there is that the DSS said they extended this invitation that you're talking about. Of course, the NLC is saying that that didn't happen now. So who do Nigerians believe? No, it's not a matter of believe me or believe them. If NLC has come out open to tell you that they were never invited, the question is DSS has also failed to show proof of invitation. So I think there's remedy attempt to the first initial error. And whether we like it or not, what has happened now will create room for individual party to actually adjust from the area of error, because it's about Nigeria, not just DSS. Whatever DSS does today in the system we operate as democracy, it goes a long way to define us as a nation, including NLC. Their response to invitation also goes a long way to define our belief in democracy. We must lead by example by honoring invitation whenever it occurs. Going with lawyers, it doesn't change appearance. But my own is, when there is invitation, NLC do appear. In this case, there was none. Now, it's interesting, because it will be about some kind of, I don't know, how do I put this? It's a conundrum of sorts. On the one hand, there are issues between the federal government and the Nigeria Labour Congress.
On the other hand, are these allegations of terrorism and all of that, the security agencies say they have certain information that one way or the other indicts, some people who are within the confines of the labor house now. So what would be your advice? I know it will be difficult for you to stand in the middle, but at the same time, you are an industrial relations advisor now, having been former deputy of the NLC. What would be your advice to both parties? Because, like it or not, the issues on the burner cannot just be ignored. What would be your advice to both sides of the table?
It's going to be in the order of approach. There is nobody that we advise federal government not to start strong as the only, as the apex authority that controls and manages the country. The question again is, why doing that, we cannot also forgo the democratic advantage of individuals as citizens of Nigeria. Because democracy has made it possible that, yes, you have the power to do certain things. Yes, I have the right also of defense, of not allowing you to do certain things. So such has to be managed with a very sensitive approach. Is in order that the Nigerian Labour Congress is not an unknown institution. It's an institution that has millions of Nigerians with it. And as such, it's not about Ajero, it's about Nigerians. So when we talk of workers, we're still referring to Nigerians. So my advice to federal government is, let there be respect for rule of law. Let us see engagement before action. Once you put up engagement before action, Nigerians will even support federal government when they take certain drastic steps. But whereby we eliminate dialogue, we eliminate chance to dialogue, we eliminate opportunity for dialogue, and you act to show that you have the power to do so. The court of law also have the power to curtail certain excess of any of the institutions in Nigeria. So I will also advise Nigerian Labour Congress has always been up to the game by making themselves available whenever invitation for dialogue, invitation for participation in any kind. So I think in the subject matter, more is to federal government, who has the entire powers to control, to act, and to administer. What they have done so far suggests that we need to learn more. And as a management practitioner, I believe that human beings are the most difficult element to manage. And as such, you must deploy excessive wisdom to the extent that your steps are not questionable when we talk about managing others beyond your own cabinet. Because we're talking about another institution that has its own constitution. They are governed by their constitution. Constitution of NLC is also respected by the law. So if NLC was put in place by law, it means they have their own character defined by law. Any attempt to shift them out of the trench, it suggests that intimidation or oppression is about to take place. And you will definitely receive resistance.
Okay. One final one. There are those who believe that the civic space is being shrunk. Do you agree?
It depends on where they are coming from. It depends on the idea.
And they are looking at the arrest of or the invitation of the NLC president, the visit to the office of Sarah, amongst other similar issues.
I just hope that we don't have a extension of what we have witnessed in the last 2 weeks. Both the nature of arrest, not arrest. Like I said, federal government has power to arrest anybody that is when it's necessary. But whereby arrest is done with impunity, then democracy will question it. And that is why you have the voice of the people can never be silent in democracy. So when we also talk about the visit to Sarah, that visit, which one should come first? It should be the other way around. DSS should not be the one visiting Sarah. Sarah should be the one honoring the invitation of DSS. So that is the area I think the president may show involvement. Because in this country, the system has allowed president to always give directive, even when institutions have their leadership, to manage them. But I think he, being a Democrat, he being somebody who won his election by virtue of democracy, should also know that Nigerians will expect him to preside by recognizing the rule of law. Absolutely. So calling those security agencies to order to respect protocols that respect human. Because in this case, Ajero right has been infringed. And even Sarab, the reserve right also to contend that very harassed visit, however you put it.
Well, I guess the coming days will let us know what either party is going to do in all of this case. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Amechi Yasugoni is former Deputy President of the Nigeria Labour Congress. He's been with us here in the studio. So, Kayla and Nyota, here we are. Any feedback?
Oh, yeah, we have one feedback, but just before that, Kayla, you're going to talk about that breaking news.
Oh, yes. You know, something was happening throughout today. I kept saying Zamfara, Zamfara. And apparently something has happened in Zamfara. And we're seeing that story from our correspondent in Zamfara. It's breaking news. Bandits have blocked the Zamfara highway. Armed bandits in the early hours of today blocked the very busy Gusau-Funtua highway. And they say this is the video. This is the visual that we have of the Zamfara, that Gusau-Funtua highway right now. So you're seeing people just standing there, and that is because a kidnapping has happened on that road this morning. An unspecified number of travelers, a commuter who spoke to our correspondent, said he's still stranded. He's among these people who are still standing around here. Told channels that the bandits stormed the highway around 7 a.m. and mounted a roadblock around the Tazame axis of the road. And according to him, the bandits, in their large numbers, with about 50 motorcycles, each carrying 3 persons, abducted unspecified number of travelers along this road, entered the road around 7 a.m. till around 9 a.m. They were still there. So people just parked on the side of the road, as you can see on your screens. They're waiting for the military to clear the road. And then, according to the eyewitness, they actually saw the bandits taking people inside the bush. Now, a military gun truck moved to the area earlier. The eyewitnesses say they were just hearing gunshots, until now no vehicle has been allowed to pass. So they're just parked on the side of the road and wondering when they're going to be able to make a move. Another person on that road, that's the Magazu Kucheri Road, which is also the road linking Gusau to Funtua, have been blocked by bandits this morning. Military men, according to the eyewitness, military men asked them to stop because the bandits blocked the road, and he says we're still waiting for them to clear that road. And when contacted, the spokesperson of the Zamfara State Police Command, ASP Yazid Abubakar, said additional troops, especially operatives of the Nigerian Police Mobile Squad, have been deployed to the affected area to clear that road. So if you are in Zamfara or you know someone who's going to be along that Gusau-Funtua road, maybe call and find out how they're doing. And of course, our hearts are going out to everyone who's going through this hard time at this very moment. A very dicey situation in Zamfara State.
Indeed. Let's all be careful while we hope that the security agencies are able to nip this in the bud and rescue the kidnapped victims. But the feedback we had from Professor Imonoka Enakena, he says, any growth in the economy that won't impact on the lives of 132 million struggling Nigerians is not good enough. We need sustainable growth that will cut inflation, lead to direct economic recovery of footstool, and pathway that will attract genuine FDIs. We are battling unendurable policies that are not interventional to cushion the effect of our current grave economic crisis.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Enaken, and for everybody who has spoken to us today on the program. Have a great day ahead. Thank you for being with us all morning. I'm Kayla Magwa. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I'm Neo Taigwe. Be that one man or from where you are, your own place. Do something different, something better than you did before.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a productive day.